Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and GameFound over the next week. And if you're new to the channel, we do this every week going over all the upcoming campaigns, so if you want to stay up to date, this is definitely the place to be. But this will probably also be one of the final longer episodes of the year because things are really going to start to cool off in December. So if you do want a bit more content, definitely go ahead and check out Board Game Co. because even though the games might be slowing down, Alex definitely won't. And Alex and I do sync up with each other periodically to share the different campaigns that we know about so far to make sure that we have all the best info for these upcoming campaign videos. So if you like this sort of content, definitely give this video a like and subscribe, but also check out Alex and give him some support as well. And I don't have any other big news that I want to cover right now, so we can just get straight into the campaigns, so let's check them out. And the first campaign we have launches on November 29th, and this one's called Aelderman, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 100 to 180 minutes to play. And this is a competitive Euro game where players are going to be playing as medieval traders as part of the Hanseatic Trade League. And the goal of this game is to not only try to gain as much wealth as possible, but also to efficiently convert that wealth into influence that will gain you votes towards being the next Aelderman of the Hanseatic Trade League. The game plays over 5 rounds with each player having 4 actions each round, and the main board's broken into a few different areas, with the top area being a sea map where players are going to be using action movement because players will be able to spend actions to move their ship around on this area of the board, and whichever space that they stop at, they're going to be able to perform the action there. This is going to allow players to gain different goods or even convert goods into other goods, and players are going to be using this rotating disc to determine how much supply is available at each of the different locations, and this is going to be rotating throughout the game, constantly changing the supply that a location might have. But as players build up those supplies and resources, they'll be able to spend those in order to build different building tiles onto the city section of the board. And building these buildings will act as a bit of an engine because each of them will be able to generate different resources or supplies or even victory points that you'll be able to use throughout the game. And players will also be trying to have the majority of their buildings in each of the different regions of the city, which will gain them additional victory points at the end of the game. But players can also use their different goods and resources to fulfill different orders or even host feasts to increase their fame, which will gain them bonuses and special actions for future trades. And after all the players have performed their 4 actions, you're going to be moving over to the guild hall section of the board, which is going to have a whole bunch of different ability cards laid out in a tableau, and players will be able to bid their victory points on these different ability cards so that they have access to them in the following round. And these can give you some really powerful abilities that can be strategic for you to win, but they also come at a cost, so you want to make sure that the benefit that you're getting from them is greater than the cost that you're going to have to pay. And after those 5 rounds, the player with the most victory points at the end of the game becomes Aelderman and wins the game. And of course, if you find this one interesting or any other that I'm going to be covering in this week's video, I have links to all these campaigns in the description below. Also launching on the 29th, we have SAS Rogue Regiment, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 20 to 120 minutes to play. And this is a cooperative stealth World War II game where players are outnumbered and deep behind enemy lines after the events of D-Day. Players are going to be choosing a stealth mission, and each of your missions is going to have a stealth meter that's going to slowly increase as players perform different actions that might arouse suspicion. So if you're firing weapons, making a lot of noise, or leaving bodies out in the open, that's going to cause that meter to fill quite rapidly, and once it does, it's going to trigger the alarm, and players are going to be moving into the battle phase. Each turn, players are going to have 4 action points in order to move, shoot, and carry out the different tasks that they need to complete in order to complete their mission. But each turn, the enemies are going to get a movement as well, and their movement is dictated by patrol lines, sentry points, and event cards, which are going to be drawn each turn. And if the players are able to complete their mission and escape without being captured or killed, then they win the game. Also launching on November 29th, we have Runar, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 60 to 90 minutes to play. And this is a competitive miniatures game where players are competing to gain the most victory points by defeating different monsters, recovering gems, completing objectives, and defeating their opponent players. At the start of the game, players are going to be choosing 3 different heroes that each come with their own miniature and deck. You're going to be shuffling those decks together to create your draw deck. And at the start of the game, the board's going to be set up with different gem and resource tokens, monster tokens, as well as the players' miniatures and statues that can be built up throughout the game in order to gain some additional bonuses. And of course, players will be able to pick up these different tokens and fight the different monsters, but each round there's going to be cards drawn that can put new tokens and monsters out on the board, or the cards can even have special effects for that round or even special actions that will be available to the players. But a really interesting aspect of this game is the way that the actions work, because in order for players to perform the different actions, they're going to be spending the action cubes, and these cubes come in a variety of different colors, and each color is going to give you access to a certain subset of actions to choose from. So when you're playing these cards, you'll want to think about which cubes you need right now and which that you might hope to have in the future. And of course, these different actions will allow you to move around on the board, attack different creatures or opponent players, or even build up your statue. But a really interesting aspect of attacking the other players is that every time you inflict damage on an opponent player, you're actually going to be stealing some of their cards. Stealing these cards and filling in the different areas of your board with them will gain you victory points. But when you're moving around the board and looking for your next battle, you might come across different gems that you can pick up, and each time you do that, you're going to be adding a cube to your tracker here on the left side of your board, and every time you fill that track all the way up, it's going to earn you a full crystal, which will also earn you victory points. And the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game, and if you're interested to know more about this one, I have links in the description below. Also launching on November 29th, we have DOUC in Danger, and this plays 2 to 6 players and takes about 20 to 30 minutes to play. And this is a competitive card game where players are trying to protect their dukes, which are a type of monkey that's endangered in Vietnam. And the designer of this game actually did travel to Vietnam and was involved in the efforts there, and this is what inspired him to create this game. And this game has a really interesting mechanism because there's always going to be one ranger player, and that player is always trying to defend their dukes. And then there's always going to be a poacher player that's trying to put the dukes in danger. And then the remaining players will all play as tourists that can either have a positive or negative effect on the dukes, because they can decide whether they want to try and rescue dukes or put more in danger. But the game plays over 3 rounds, and for the first round you're just going to randomly choose which player is the ranger player, but then after that it's going to go to whichever player is currently in the lead. But the interesting thing about being the ranger player is that you actually get to decide which player is the poacher, and then like I said, all the remaining players are tourists. Each turn you deal 5 cards to each player, and then the poacher player is going to put one of their duke cards from their hand into the center of the play area. And then once that card's in play, all the other players can play cards according to whatever goal that they currently have for that turn. If they want to save the dukes, then they have to play a same suit card of higher value than the one that was played, or they can play a trump card. But if they want to cause more trouble, you can actually put more dukes in danger by placing a duke matching the value of one of the cards that's already been played into a new stack. The turn's going to end once the ranger player no longer wants to play a card, and all the other players no longer want to put more dukes in danger. At that point, any duke cards that weren't able to be saved are going to be put in front of the ranger player, and they're going to count to their lost dukes for the rest of the game. Players will then swap cards according to who's ever in the lead, and then you're going to deal out 5 cards just like before, and then the turns continue in the exact same way. This continues until the draw deck runs out, which triggers the end of a round, and then you're going to be playing for 2 more rounds. Then the player with the least lost duke cards in front of them at the end of the game wins the game. And if this one sounds interesting to you, or if you want to learn more, or even learn more about what efforts are being done to try and help the endangered dukes, you can find links in the description below. And also launching on the 29th, we have the next campaign from AEG, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 20 to 40 minutes to play. And this one looks like a lot of fun, and it also has a really interesting mechanism. This one is a tile placement game, and in this game, each player is going to have their own board that they're going to be placing tiles on throughout the game. But the thing that makes this one a little bit different, and the reason that this game has the name that it has, is because of one particular component and mechanism that this game offers. Because with this game, you're going to be getting this really cool box here that you're going to be dumping these cubes into, and then that box is going to be determining the pattern that you have to work with for the round. And rather than just explaining to you how this works, I'll just go ahead and show you because it is really cool. In this video, Kimberly's already put the cubes into the box, and now she's just shaking it up, pushing the tab, and then when she lifts it, you'll see that all the cubes are out on display like magic, randomly in a particular pattern. And this is really cool because it's going to allow for a ton of different permutations while still guaranteeing a certain ratio of colors. Plus, it just looks like a ton of fun. But only the active player will be able to do this in a given round, but that privilege will be alternating between the players each round as well. So everyone will get a chance to do this. But then the active player will also be able to choose one of the colors in the 9x9 grid, and then they'll gain the tiles matching that color, but then they have to put it on the board in the same orientation and configuration that it showed up in that 9x9 grid. So you can see in this image here that they chose to go with the blue cubes because they gained 3 blue tiles, and then they put them onto their board in the exact same configuration. Then all the other players will be able to do the same thing. The only catch here is that they can't use the same color that the active player chose, but they can choose any of the remaining colors. And then the game continues like this, with players trying to fill up the different areas of their board, but then also trying to create different patterns between the tiles, because you're going to be gaining victory points for having particular patterns, like having certain tiles adjacent to each other, creating long chains of roads or trails, or connecting different buildings along those trails and roads. And another thing about this game that I really like, and I think that will keep the game really fresh and exciting each time you play, is that you'll be able to put these different tokens around the edge of the board, and these are going to give you different victory point conditions for each of the rows and columns on the board. So this means not only are you trying to create different patterns between the tiles on the board, but you're also trying to achieve those different conditions for each of the rows and columns, which will just give you a lot of different variety from game to game. And of course, the player that does all this the best and gains the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. And if you want to see more, you can check out the campaign in the description below. And next on the 29th, we have React, and this is a 2-player head-to-head dueling game that takes just 30 to 45 minutes to play. And in this game, players are playing as different asymmetrical characters, and each of these characters are different types of artists that will be using their different artistry in battle. Each of the characters can play very different from each other and have very different play styles, and each of them will come with their own set of standees, tokens, an action deck, as well as reference cards for each of their standees, and masterpiece cards, which kind of work as a power meter that you'll be able to build up throughout the game in order to unleash some special attacks. But the way that this game works is that each player is going to be starting the game with a hand of 4 cards, and then each turn both players will be drawing a new card from their deck into their hand. The active player can then just play 1 card from their hand, but then they can also play any amount of the reference cards for any of the standees that they currently have out on the board. But a really cool aspect of this game, and I think something that makes it look like a lot of fun, is the way that these cards are put into play. Because each card you play, you're going to be playing one at a time, and you're going to be putting it into the react chain. Once a card's in the react chain, that gives your opposing player a chance to react to it by playing one of their reaction cards. This will allow them to manipulate the outcome of the card that you intend to play, but it doesn't stop there, because you can also play reaction cards to your opponent's reaction cards, as well as to your own card if your opponent decided not to play a reaction card. This means that you can modify the outcome back into your favor or augment the cards that you have in play in order to create different chaining effects. And these cards will do different things, like allowing you to put more standees out on the board, allow you to move the standees that you have out on the board, put out different tokens that may have different effects depending on the character that you're playing as, and of course, attack your opposing player. And the rules to win this game are pretty clear, because all you have to do is inflict 3 damage on your opposing player, and if you're able to do that first, then you win the game. And I know I whipped through this one pretty quickly, but I do think it looks like a ton of fun, and the fact that I was able to explain it so quickly just goes to show how easy this one would be to table. And of course, I have links in the description below. And now on November 30th, we have Hellbringer, and this plays 1 to 4 players cooperatively and takes about 45 to 180 minutes to play. And this one is a cooperative dungeon crawler where players are going to be choosing their character at the start of the game. Each character is going to have different stats, skills, and gear that they're going to be starting with, but that could be upgraded throughout the game. Players are going to be choosing a scenario along with its final boss, and then you're going to be building up the dungeon by creating different decks of cards and then stacking them on top of each other to represent the different levels of the dungeon. Each one of these levels is going to have different gear and monsters in them, as well as a tome card which causes an effect and also provides narrative for that portion of the dungeon. And then once you get through all these levels, you'll be going up against the final boss, because that card's going to be put on the very bottom. On a player's turn, they can pay their action points to activate or equip new cards from their hand onto their personal player board in order to perform different actions. Weapons will allow you to roll a certain number of dice in order to attack monsters, and defeating monsters is a good thing because you'll be able to keep those cards and then slide them into whichever area you want onto the side of your board in order to upgrade that specific stat. Players will then draw cards back up to their hand size, which can gain you new cards into your hand, but as you're drawing these cards, you might also draw different monster cards. And when this happens, the monsters are going to go onto the monster board, but each of the monsters will have a different level of perception perception that makes them more difficult to see, and depending on your character's perception, you may not be able to find those monsters. And of course, you won't be able to attack what you don't see, so they will be able to attack you, but you won't be able to attack back until you're able to raise your perception high enough. And during the monster's turn, you're going to be rolling a die to determine what the monsters do. They could attack the players or the players' companions, or they may cause the players to have to discard a number of cards from their hands. Get through all the levels of the dungeon and defeat that final boss, and you win that scenario. And launching on December 1st, we have GOLDblivion, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes just 20 to 80 minutes to play. And this one is a competitive deck builder, but it also looks like it has a really solid solo mode as well. And something that makes this one really interesting, and one of the reasons that's my own personal pick of the week, is that this is a deck builder where you're going to be modifying your deck really rapidly, because each turn you're going to be able to burn a card from your hand, and whenever you do that, you're going to be sliding that into one of the slots on the top of your own personal player board, which is going to help build up an engine that can allow you to buy more cards or do different things later in the game. And I really love this because it means you're going to be ending up with a very different deck at the end of the game than what you started with, unlike a lot of other deck building games where it's really difficult to burn cards from your hand. But this is also going to create some pretty tense decisions because you're always going to have to discard a card from your hand, which means that if you draw a bunch of cards that you really like, you're going to have to choose one of them to burn. And I think this bit of chaos will just add a ton of excitement as you're trying to roll with the punches, but it won't be too punishing because you will be changing your deck so rapidly that you will recover from it. But in this game, each player is actually going to be managing 2 different decks. There's your development deck, which is the main deck in the game and the way that you're going to be performing your actions. And then there is the combat deck that only ever really comes into play anytime that you choose to take a combat action. On a turn, you'll draw 5 of those development cards into your hand, and then you'll be discarding 1 to one of the areas of your board, and then you'll be able to take 2 actions. And the actions that you have to choose from is to play a card, which can allow you to do different things like gain coins or blocks, which are used to purchase more cards, or building cards, which actually go into a tableau and can be used once per turn outside of your hand of cards. But some of these cards will even have a combat action, which will allow you to engage in combat at one of the different locations on the location board. And in order to do that, you just choose one of these locations, with the mountains being more difficult and the forests being more simple. And revealing that tile will reveal a combat value. You'll be able to draw as many cards from your combat deck equal to the number of empty edges of the tile that you have chosen to reveal. And a successful combat will earn you the resources that are revealed on that tile. But depending on the cards that you draw from either deck, it might allow you to do some additional things like draw more cards into your hand, modify your deck, or even augment other cards in your hand. But other than playing a card from your hand, you can use an action to purchase a card from the shared market, or to use one of the action tiles on either side of the board. And whenever you use that action tile, you're going to be flipping it over to the other side, revealing another version of that action, which will be flipping back and forth each time that that action is taken. And players are doing all of this to try and gain gold, which they can then turn into gold ingots by using actions. And then the first player that gains 10 ingots wins the game. And if you want to check this one out for yourself, I got links in the description below. And launching on December 3rd, we have Megalomania, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes just 30 to 45 minutes to play. And this is a competitive trick-taking game, but what makes this one so interesting is that the game plays over 12 rounds, and each round you're going to be drawing a random mission card, which is going to outline how you score points for that specific round. This means that each round you might be trying to do something a little bit different, like winning just a certain number of tricks, or winning tricks of only a certain suit, or something along those lines. And something else that makes this trick-taking game very unique is that each round, each player is going to be able to choose some combination of cubes, gems, or scroll cards. The cubes allow you to manipulate your card's number up or down depending on how many cubes you put on that card, while the crystals allow you to activate the card's special ability, while the scroll will give you just a one-time use ability that you can just use anytime on the round. You'll be using these to your advantage to try and fulfill the requirements of those missions, and the player that has the most points at the end of the game wins the game. And those are all the campaigns I have for you this week, but there were a few more games that I was expecting in the month of November, but I never actually got a final launch date for, so I'm not sure if they'll launch. But those games were Ducks in Tow, the Bugs and Slugs expansion, which is an expansion to the game Ducks in Tow, And then there was 1812, The War on the Great Lakes Frontier, which is a 2-player nautical war game. And then there was Homeworld Fleet Command, which is a competitive tacticals miniature game based on the video game with the same name. And then there's Pole Position, which is a competitive racing game. And then finally, Drill Bit Dwarves, which is a competitive card game. But of course, that's still not everything I have for you this week, because there is always a giveaway, and this one's for Dark Venture 2nd Edition. And if you're not familiar with this game, this is a retro story-based adventure game that takes place in a post-apocalyptic sci-fi world. And in this game, each player is going to be choosing their hero, and then they're going to be drawing their main quest and their side quests. And players are going to be trying to complete those by playing different cards, using the actions in order to play those cards. And there's going to be location cards that you can play onto the map to modify the board. And then there's item cards that can be played into your inventory to grant you special abilities. And then there's character cards that can be played onto the map to help your hero or complete different quest conditions. And of course, you'll also be able to engage in combat with different beasts, combining your stats with dice rolling and augmenting that with any cards that you might have available to you. You can't die in this game, but if you do lose a battle, you can go unconscious, which can potentially cost you some of your turns, which is going to allow all the other characters and players to get stronger while you're still stuck in your unconscious state. And this giveaway is going to be for the Dark Venture 2nd Edition core set pledge, and that's going to get you the core game as well as all unlocked stretch goals. And to enter this giveaway, just leave a comment down below. This is the only giveaway I'm offering this week, and it is worldwide, so there's no need to throw a hashtag into it. Any comment will get you entered into the giveaway. But if you want to leave a hashtag, I won't stop you. But maybe just let us know any adventure that you plan to go on, or maybe one that you just completed. For myself, the closest thing I have to a dark venture is cross-country skiing, and it is pretty dark too, because anytime after 5 p.m. in the winter months in Canada, you're pretty much in complete darkness. Thank you, daylight savings time. Good luck in the giveaway, but now let's go ahead and draw the winner for last week's giveaway, which was for Super Dark, a game about money in politics. Lots of darkness this month, and to draw a winner, I use this fancy application here. All these extra names down here are bonus entries from my Patreon subscribers. If you like this sort of content and want to help make all these efforts just a little bit more sustainable for me, you can check out my Patreon in the description below, and it really means a lot. But let's go ahead and draw those comments and draw a winner. And the winner is Jason Yu. And I did ask viewers to let us know if they plan to buy anything for Black Friday, and Jason says that he was most definitely on the lookout for good board games, and he's just starting out his collection and not a ton of funds to start with, and this can be an expensive hobby, and the only thing better than buying a board game is winning it. So I'm really happy to be able to help get your collection started, and just reach out to me at adam@shelfclutter.com and we'll get that pledge all sorted out. And I just realized that instead of clicking add extra entries for all my Patreon subscribers, I ended up doing the complete opposite. We'll just chalk that up to the randomness of the draw, and we'll play it as it lies. It's kind of funny, and there's always lots more giveaways to come. And those are all the campaigns I have for you this week. I wasn't expecting too much for this week because there was a lot of games that I just never heard of before, but after doing all this research, there's actually quite a few that I think look really interesting. I think there's actually quite a lot of sleeper hits here that I'm actually going to be checking out once their campaign launches, so I hope there's a few that you thought looked interesting as well. And as always, thanks so much for watching, and until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.